Okay.
And then go ahead and start the record as well. We are live.
Okay. The chair calls to order the August 28th meeting of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. Welcome back, commissioners and staff. It's been a couple months. In your materials, you have the today's agenda, which I believe was just recently updated an hour ago, and the minutes from our prior meeting. If everyone has had a chance to review both the agenda and the minutes from our prior meeting, including the updated version, can any commissioners or staff identify any corrections that need to be made to either the agenda or minutes as written? There are no corrections. I will take a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to approve the agenda and minutes as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Turning to today's agenda, we first have an advisory opinion to rediscuss. This has been an item that has been in two prior meetings. And so, Caitlin, are you going to speak to this?
Yes. So this is the advisory opinion we've been discussing at the end of the June meeting, and I'll give a very brief reminder of where we're at because we've had a summer in between. So where the commission had left off last time was requesting additional information from Mr. Cozine and specifically Ed Choice, because I think we were hung up on the last question that was asked. So just as a reminder, the first question asked was if Ed Choice exceeded the $1,000 registration threshold for lobbying under KSA 46-222A3, are they required to register as a lobbyist even if the legislature is no longer in session? Oh, perfect. And the test, as we discussed before, the test was indifferent to whether or not we had just started, so this is perfect timing, over whether or not the legislature was in session. We didn't seem to have issue there as a group. The second question was if Ed Choice was required to register as a lobbyist, does it need to take additional steps to register as a nonprofit as opposed to registering any other person? And the answer, that's more of an administrative question. The answer to that is no, they register the same by designating an individual, a person, to serve as their lobbyist. And the final question, which is where there was hang up in the June meeting, is if Ed Choice is permitted to pay for Kansas legislators' travel, lodging, food, and beverage to their to Ed Choice's annual conference under the KSA 46-237 sub H exception. And Ed Choice provided us, as I've attached with the amended advisory opinion, additional information regarding what they were founded for. And the entire mission and the point of Ed Choice is educational freedom and policy, or educational choice. And so that is from them. From when we asked for additional information of what they were founded for, it was that policy focus and related to that end goal. And so based on that additional information that they have provided, I am still of the opinion and present it to the commissioners to discuss that they do not qualify for the exception under 46-237 sub D, as that is sub H, because that is a limited exception. However, they can use the exception in 46-237 sub D, which allows for the gifting of food and beverages, because they're not presumed to influence legislators. So that's kind of an update on where we're at. I'm happy to re-explore different portions of the opinion. But from my notes and reviewing the minutes of the last meeting, that was really where our holdup was, is we wanted to hear more from the person asking for the opinion on what they were founded for.
And so is it my understanding that the only material difference in the wording of the opinion that we have in front of us is in the last paragraph on page 3, where we inserted the phrase based on the additional information submitted by Ed Choice?
Yes.
Okay, do any commissioners have questions? Is this Is this the consensus that this
So,
completes the review? Any thoughts?
so I
would move, Mr. Chairman.
I wanted to bring up a point first. Would I do that?
Well, we can make the motion and then you can make your point.
Well,
Sure.
yeah, but then pointless.
Go ahead.
Anyway, I accidentally read what were in those three dots. I looked up the whole law.
Sure.
And so, and that actually says sponsored by the government of any foreign nation or any organization organized under the laws of a foreign nation, and then, or all these other nonprofits. And what I don't understand is how that, it seems like there's equal protection issues here, that a legislator can go to a foreign country or a group from a foreign country, but we pick and choose what nonprofit organizations in the United States we're going to allow them to talk with. So I just wonder, would we want to consider getting an advisory opinion from the Attorney General on the constitutionality of that? This seems like equal protection and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly are kind of being impeded there.
That kind of goes, I don't see the equal protection concerns in the statute. There aren't, I mean, foreign nationals don't have access to necessarily the same treatment. That's a little bit out of my.
But see, they could influence legislators. They go overseas. They're getting paid to go overseas. I think there's a case that years ago they went to Turkey or something.
So yeah, it was a group that went to Jerusalem and the federal legislator from Johnson County took off his clothes and dove into the.
I remember. Yes. That became
the next election.
Yeah, I do remember that. But it just, I don't know, it just seems incongruous to have those two things and then selectively pick nonprofits. And then the ones that are under, they had the words here about, what does it say? Serving the purpose of strengthening state legislators. I think there's at least 3 of those that are probably recognized. And then there's associated nonprofits with those nonprofits. But why, and those nonprofits, they do focus on the structure of the legislature and the organization of the legislature, but they also go off on all sorts of policy issues. So why are we picking which nonprofits can talk about policy issues and which ones can't?
Well, just to clarify kind of how the law operates, this is, in general, there's a prohibition on receiving gifts, and they can only receive certain gifts if they are subject to an exception. This carves out to allow, basically, it permits some nonprofits, if it's very clear based on their mission, that this is carved out so that those nonprofits that clearly are not serving in an advocacy role in any way can give gifts, because there's not a reason for the public to perceive a corruption.
But I guess my claim is some of those nonprofits that are these national groups do have policy things that they're advocating for.
I'm confident that they would lose that equal protection claim.
With equal protection, we're treating foreign citizens in some sense better than we are our own citizens.
But that being said, I mean, that's not really an issue here. We're only looking at this one very specific question.
But it's this
If we're gonna argue this, that would be an argument for the legislature, not for us.
Yes, I would say the same, because we're just tasked on answering the specific questions that were asked of us. So while we may have different opinions on the statute as a whole, I think today we're just trying to answer Mr. Cozine and Ed Choice's question of, does this particular nonprofit meet that exception?
I don't, it just seems like we're picking and choosing. We're having favorites here.
Well, we didn't draft the statute.
But that's where
I see your.
that's where it's a constitutional question. Is can this be a constitutional test?
Yeah, I think that it's useful to provide guidance. I think this is now the 3rd meeting where this opinion has been up for discussion, and I think that we could continue to poke all kinds of hypothetical holes in it over time. But in this instance, I think it's important that we move through it and that we provide some level of guidance. And there are many things that are perhaps within a much wider scope that we could discuss. But Commissioner Solbach has made a motion, I believe, to approve. Is that correct, Commissioner Solbach?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and renew my motion. We can still ask for the Attorney General's opinion, even if this passes.
Could you clarify?
That'd be fair.
Could you clarify your motion just so it's
For the minutes.
Yeah, thanks.
I move that we approve the draft opinion dated August 28, 2022 to John Cozine.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Is there any additional discussion?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. So I know that they were making a request for themselves and whether they fit within something. I'll say I'm still not comfortable with making a factual finding about everything that they do or can do. And I'm uncomfortable with that. But legally speaking, I'm more interested in what our view is on lobbying in general. Because when I look at the lobbying in the statute 46-225, lobbying is defined as promoting or opposing a series of things or doing entertainment within a particular year. Are we, as a precedential statement, are we saying that anyone who has a similar educational program to Ed Choice is a lobbyist?
No. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. I can clarify.
Sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
There are two statutes at issue on lobbying. There's,
Well, before we get to any of them, though, we have to make a finding that they're lobbying.
well, first of all, 46-237 is a prohibition on gifts that is irrespective of whether they are a lobbyist. However, in addition, the definition of lobbying is very broad. The definition of lobbyist is very narrow. So many people engage in lobbying, but very few people are lobbyists. So those definitions, you don't have to register as a lobbyist unless you meet the definition of a lobbyist. Even if you engage in lobbying, there would be huge issues if everyone who appeared in front of the legislature had to register as a lobbyist.
Right.
But that's not how the law operates. But either way, 46-237 is a prohibition on gifts that is mostly irrespective of whether someone is a lobbyist.
So the 46-222A3 is our finding that they and anyone similarly situated must register as a lobbyist.
So the question is that if they've met that, essentially their question is, sorry, Caitlin.
No, you go on.
Okay.
You're filling it.
Right. So the question that they asked is, if we spend over $1,000 on lobbying, that meets the expenditure threshold. Does that mean we have to register as a lobbyist? And that question is fairly straightforward. Frankly, it's yes. The statute says you spend over $1,000 on lobbying, therefore you become a lobbyist and have to register.
Okay,
So
so doesn't it circle right back to my initial question, though, that this is lobbying?
Their question is presuming that they are engaging in lobby spending. That's why it's phrased as if Ed Choice exceeds the $1,000 registration threshold. They didn't ask, is Ed Choice engaged in lobbying or is Ed Choice a lobbyist? They asked specifically about that $1,000 lobbyist registration threshold.
So this is not actually finding that they are lobbying or that this act counts as lobbying.
that is exactly correct.
Correct.
Can we at least state that we are presuming that in fact lobbying is being conducted by lobbyists?
Would that be resolved by adding to the number one, if Ed Choice exceeds the $1,000 I'm trying to figure out how to
So
phrase
the third paragraph,
lobbyist expenditure threshold?
the third paragraph of the analysis, the test of, if that simply said, for purposes of this opinion, we are assuming that this is a lobbyist and that they are engaged in lobbying.
Sure.
Well,
Well,
to clarify, so 46-222A3 says, if you expend over $1,000 on lobbying, that is one of the tests that make you a lobbyist. So essentially their question is, if we do this, are we a lobbyist? So that is the question we're asking. We're not presuming the answer. We're just stating that is what the statute says.
that's how it's phrased as well in the previous. It says the first question posed is whether Ed Choice expending over $1,000 on lobbying outside of the duration of the regular session changes whether it must register as a lobbyist. It's not asking the verb lobbying, it's asking, are they a noun lobbyist?
Catherine, are you proposing a change to this to meet his issue?
I think it's resolved already, actually.
So I mean, I disagree with that because my reading of it was that this included a finding that in fact this constituted lobbying by lobbyists. And I think this opinion can spiral out of control for a lot of organizations that simply educate. And interpreted,
Does,
Those are two different questions though, because educating is different from the $1,000 expenditure question. Those are different questions. The educating is part of the 46-237 sub H gift exception. So we're not,
which is applicable to lobbyists for lobbying.
no, 46-237 is the gift prohibition.
I
So
see,
it's-
I see the confusion. Okay, so there are three questions that the opinion is.
Excuse me.
The first two questions are essentially what are about the lobbying laws, and the third question is about the gift laws. They are both in chapter 46, and obviously lobbyists do frequently give gifts, and their conduct as a lobbyist is subject to the gift laws. But the gift prohibition does not require that someone is a lobbyist. A legislator cannot accept a gift from anyone with a special interest over the $40 threshold, unless unless it meets an exception.
So one and two, we're basically just reciting back a statute.
Yes, that is exactly correct.
Right.
Confirm.
Under the presumption that, in fact, what's being asked has already occurred.
Yes,
Mhm.
based on the facts as they allege them.
And then the third one should be disconnected from the whole idea about lobbying and lobbyists.
Mhm.
And it's just a generic gift
Gift.
question.
Yes, that is exactly.
Yes.
The opinion, I think, can be read in a different way.
What can if you're getting confused by it, we definitely need to provide that clarity.
Well, but that, but.
Well, I mean, I think that is there a sentence that we can add that makes this clear, like on finally, do you think that we could add a sentence that says, disconnected from the question of the previous questions regarding the lobbying laws?
Could we just add the numbers that we used in the questions down below in the analysis?
Just so they're clear subheaders.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that third paragraph looks like it's number one, the additionally is number two, and then finally is number three.
Okay, Cass, are you now proposing a change?
Caitlin.
Caitlin?
I thought he was addressing me, so I. That.
Yes, I am proposing to add subheaders for each question as it applies to the analysis in the opinion.
I think that
Yeah, if second agrees, I would incorporate that into my motion.
Okay, so in terms of subheadings, how would those, is there a way that you can articulate that a little bit more precisely, Caitlin?
Yes. Yes, I think Commissioner Berger started to offer that. So the first question number one will be repeated as a subheader before the first paragraph in analysis and opinion. Question number two will be repeated as a subheader before the paragraph that begins, additionally, a nonprofit organization does not register any differently. And then the third question will be a subheader before, finally, regarding your gift question, KSA 46-237 provides.
Then moving to the third kind of opinion here. Part of our opinion would be a finding that ed choice based off of policy advocacy is affecting persons. That's the top of the third page of the document. And again, I don't think that mere education, even if it's oriented toward a viewpoint, represents policy advocacy affecting a person to a degree that we would want an opinion that says that anyone who's engaging in that activity is in fact violating the statute. And separately, I would say, I also don't agree that the history of interpretation of 46-237 has been a narrow interpretation. That Florida case is a very, very specific situation, and it was itself a narrow application of the rule, not a narrow interpretation of it. So I don't agree with the necessarily ultimate conclusion to it based off of someone who's just talking to individuals.
I will say that I think every lobbyist would characterize what they do as providing education. And if we carve out, Yes, and in fact, we have run into this before where a lobbyist will say, I know I'm a registered lobbyist, but I'm just providing education. It is only education about the policies I want to advance on my side of the issue. But we're providing education, which really is what a lot of components of what lobbyists do as well. So I think that trying to drill down in the way that we're discussing here, I think poses some issues in trying to say that anyone who claims to be providing education is different. I think the way the statute isolates this, I think Caitlin's done really good work on drilling into, the statute says basically why were they founded? And the information received from the requester, I personally cannot read it in any other way other than that it does not meet those 4: serve, inform, educate, and strengthen. Also worth noting, educate is only one of those 4, and it has to meet all 4. Strength has to serve, inform, educate, and strengthen legislatures in all states.
So just for my clarification and understanding, if the mission statement said to educate legislatures, but their focus on policy was still on choice of where they go to school, it'd be a completely different matter.
It could be. I think that serve and strengthen become the issue. Strengthen is the one that when they added that to, when that inclusion in the statute, I think is the one that I think is most interesting. I'm not sure. I mean, anyone can say they're strengthening the legislature.
Is there an advisory
Well,
opinion
yeah,
that
I mean,
explains what that
Yeah.
means?
No, not yet.
Sure.
We can build one if you want. But yeah, I think that, that may be very well be a different question because as Caitlin pointed out, the statute is really about drilling into their mission statement. What do they exist for? And we can talk about the actual conduct and things like that as well. But realistically, the statute seems to be clear to me at least.
And again, to avoid, the comment was made, I don't remember who said this, but that, I think it was Commissioner Berger, that it might be that we're not saying you're prohibited if you're doing this. This portion is about the general gift prohibition and about whether or not someone meets an exception to give a gift to a legislator. And exceptions are generally construed more narrow to the prohibitions. But again, it's not telling someone that if they do something, I'm going in circles here because
Oh, this is a
Sorry.
good discussion though.
Yeah, and
And I always go back to, this only protects this one entity if they were to act on our advice, right? Like other ones can look at it, and if they want an advisory opinion on their own, they could still come.
or similarly situated entities.
That's why holding it to these facts.
Yeah, that's why it's so
Limited.
specific.
It says based on the additional information submitted by Ed Choice, I think is a pretty.
So other, covers
We
that.
could add other language that makes
Narrows
it,
it more.
yeah, if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Director Scoglin,
Yes.
has there ever been a time where we've had just kind of like a disclaimer that has accompanied our advisory opinions to, I guess, qualify and maybe deal with some of the issues that we're discussing now, about saying that every opinion rendered is hypothetically based on the information provided to the commission, and that in no way is this a finding of fact, I guess, to try to alleviate Commissioner Berger's concern?
We have had a couple of opinions that have essentially said, reading between the lines on a couple of those opinions, it appears that the commission may have had reason to doubt the representations that were being made. But in some of those instances, because the commission says essentially, based upon the facts as offered, if the facts are different, then it's perhaps that this does not apply. There's ways that we can include language like that, and it wouldn't be unprecedented if my memory is correct.
We actually did that in the last opinion.
We did.
We had a final paragraph that says the opinion only addresses the legality of, and we included the specific factual circumstance that has been identified. It does not address or endorse the legality of third parties necessarily, or their structure. It's only limited to the facts and analysis as outlined above.
Now, we can include something like this disclaimer that you're talking about as standard language in an opinion response as well. That just says opinions are drafted and created based upon the information provided by the requester, and any legal conclusion and guidance is dependent on the accuracy thereof, or something like that.
And to really emphasize the advisory nature of in the use as a guidance document, Commissioner Berger, is that a useful idea from your perspective to have a standard disclaimer to qualify the purpose of the advisory opinion?
I think that kind of undermines the whole idea of the advisory opinion. The advisory opinion is to, yes, answer a specific question, but also to provide information for others so that they have clarity and certainty going forward. And I'm just 1 of 9. I'm expressing my thought on where I don't think this opinion is really what we should be doing. And frankly, I don't think it's correct. But I'm 1 of 9, so.
Well,
Get
How
where
many-
Commissioner Berger's coming from too, if we're, giving some kind of direction where people are gonna look at it allegorically, but then if we have a disclaimer that says, but you should ask us specifically for you, just in case. Yeah,
That's what you'd like to do.
no, I'm saying I agree with Commissioner Berger that putting in a disclaimer does kind of undermine
Oh, okay.
advisory opinion.
Well, we need to take a vote on it. And so we have 6 commissioners present. Is that correct, Director Scoblin?
That's correct, and I don't know if the motion was seconded, but I may have
No,
missed it.
I believe it was
Okay.
seconded, and we'll get to that in a minute. But do we need a majority of the 6 commissioners in order to approve?
And what is the standard?
Parliamentarian.
Or is it of the 9?
What do you think, Jesse? We haven't really run into problems where the vote was close enough for this to be an open question.
Pretty sure it's majority.
Majority of the quorum,
Yeah.
not majority of the body, right?
Majority of the quorum.
So
Okay.
it would be 4 to adopt.
And so just to be clear, Commissioner Solbach, you had made a motion, and I believe you had said you had amended that motion to incorporate the nuance that Caitlin articulated about the subheadings and the integration of the questions into the body of the document.
That's
Commissioner Ramirez, do you second that motion?
Yes, I second it.
Okay. And well, why don't we just go ahead and take a vote on it unless there's anything else that needs to be discussed? All in favor of approving the opinion as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Okay.
So do we have three on 3 and or 3 on 2 and then myself. So I would vote to approve. But then that makes that,
3 on 3, yeah.
so
We have 2 options, given the split vote. We could either delay again and take a vote at a meeting with more commissioners. Or we could simply send the matter back and say, guys, I don't know if this is possible. I mean, the FEC does this, and say that the commission could not reach consensus on the guidance provided. I think those are probably the 2 options. And the second one is one that I'm not aware that we've ever had to take, but
I think if they request an opinion, we have an obligation to give them an opinion. And that's, we need to work it out.
So,
I think that would be the better option. I generally prefer when we can give good guidance.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if that's the case, then we may just need to delay until we have 9 members in the room to see the additional 3 members' thoughts.
can we ask the nays, what change would you make to approve it?
To the question.
For me, I'd want to remove any findings with regard to this entity itself and simply state it as the assumptions of the opinion. We're not finding that they are or aren't in any particular thing, but instead we are assuming they're a lobbyist engaged in lobbying by these starters. And saying 1 and 2, we should really just reiterate what the statute says. And not, we don't need to go beyond all that. And then on number 3, I read the opinion as orbiting around the idea that policy advocacy is what is controlling it. And that comes back to my original kind of objection to the opinion that we're not making that, we shouldn't be making that finding on the entity.
How would policy advocacy serve, strengthen, inform, and educate?
Well, why do we include that in the opinion as such a specific, like, requirement.
That is the statute.
It's in the law, yeah.
That is the statutory exception we're discussing, and
They requested an opinion. It's important that we give them an opinion.
Right. So I don't think that simply education
So
constitutes.
can we,
What would you change?
can we ask the AG for an opinion? And I mean, if he says it's enforceable, then I'd vote.
Granted, the Ethics Commission has the advisory authority over our statutes. The AG
Oh,
can
they-
speak to constitutionality perhaps, but they can't speak to the campaign finance.
Okay.
Yeah.
we could informally ask them about the equal
Well,
protection question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe.
Um, If that's,
If the foreign clause wasn't there, I wouldn't like it, but I'd have to agree with it. But with the foreign thing there, I just don't. There's two different things that bothers me.
do you thoughts
Is
on
it-
equal protection, or do
Is
you
it
need to go
fair
more?
to ask the nays to articulate, for the sake of Caitlin and Director Scogland, maybe the issues they have? I think it would be a useful feedback mechanism, and I understand we're discussing it now, but as it relates more specifically to the language in this particular opinion, would that be a useful thing from your point of view, Caitlin, to
That's useful
take
for her,
that
yeah.
information in, to give yourself between now and our next meeting to consider and to try to thread the needle so that, to Commissioner Solbach's point, we're fundamentally doing what we ought to be doing, which is providing guidance to those who request it?
And I agree with Commissioner Solbach. We have when an opinion is requested, we have to issue an opinion.
So we're gonna hold this off until the next meeting, subject to the nays communicating with Caitlin.
What's your opinion? You didn't get to voice yours.
Yeah, no, my concern is kind of on the sides of making evaluation of ed choice specifically saying you won't be in here for these reasons. We've evaluated, you don't meet all four based on the mission statement. It does seem kind of like just because the specific words are used in there, it comes down to us determining which policy advocacy positions qualify as educating someone if they don't say educating in the mission statement.
So we send an email to Caitlin then, is that?
So,
We cannot because of
Individually.
coma.
Oh,
We have to talk about it now.
Yeah.
okay.
so if
That's a
we rework the end of it,
I can take out references to policy advocacy and just make it specific to them not satisfying all four elements. I don't have to say the words policy advocacy. I could just talk about how their mission I have to base it off their mission statement. Otherwise, I don't know what to base it off of.
so should we put that and then add unless provided other evidence otherwise? Or something or like something along the lines like based on the information provided, we don't believe you meet these criteria.
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So when I'm looking at, like the opinion regarding Florida. That had to do not with advocacy, but it had to do with it being located purely in the state of Florida and limited to Florida as its point of expression, of impact. But yet that seems to have been expanded in this opinion to then be a statement as to what's necessary for education. I read subsection H, the purpose of serving, informing, educating, and strengthening state legislatures in all states of the nation. And maybe we have a statutory construction and whether the state legislatures in all states of the nation is a qualification of serving, informing, educating, and strengthening. And I just might fundamentally just disagree with the opinion that it is, if it is an organization which is therefore even single issue education. Is that a nice way to say all that? Single issue education, that doesn't still qualify as serving, informing, educating, and strengthening state legislatures in all states of the nation.
If I might,
Yeah.
first on the Florida opinion, the next sentence after the one you indicated says, additionally, the foundation's mission does not appear to serve, inform, educate, and strengthen state legislatures in all states, which is part of why this is discussed here. The second is that I want the commission to maybe take it.
Didn't their additional statement express that it was all states?
This organization is all states.
Yes,
Ed
yes.
Choice, yes. So I think the commission may want to step back for a moment and think about what you're talking about here. There are multiple people who seem to be voicing the view that this exception should allow any lobbyist to provide any gift, provided that they lobby all legislatures in the nation and they claim that what they're doing is education. If that is the position of the commission, there is not much point to have gift laws. And I mean that very sincerely, because there are lots of national lobbyists and we should not be penalizing the ones that only lobby in Kansas functionally, which is what that would be the effect there. And I'm not sure how to best resolve this tension, but I want the commission to, I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to have consensus. I love when everyone agrees and provides the guidance, but I want everyone to think about what the best interpretation is of the language that is there, so we can provide the guidance that we exist to provide, essentially.
I think that steps then into what Commissioner Glenn was requesting. When we don't follow the language in the statute itself, I think we step into real trouble, because now we're pushing individual conceptions as opposed to the language that's there.
See, I
I don't want to step into that at all.
think we are following the language there. I think just we have personal different opinions on how to interpret said language. But I mean, based on the construction with serving, forming, educating, and strengthening, without them, outside of the information they've given us, we don't have any reason to think that they're doing those other ones.
And I kind of want to be a harbinger of death here to say that if we do make this particular opinion,
Sorry.
that, and yeah, the individual, any organization that purports to serve, inform, educate, and strengthen, state legislatures will be equally prohibited. And maybe that's the whole,
How,
maybe that's not a problem.
how would they be prohibited?
There is a current gift prohibition. The legislature has determined that. And to be clear too, it's not just any group that says that. It's based on what they were established for. And that is significant as well, because you can't just, I mean, a lot of these groups have historically existed. There aren't a ton that just like, oh, I'm just going to create this and I will establish it only for the purpose of serving, informing, educating, and strengthening. If they do that, they comply with the exception and they can get the exception under the statute. But
What you're saying, 237A has the strict prohibition, basically, of anything over $100.
46,237, yes. Yes. Sorry. There's 237 little a and then there's 46,237, so I get confused.
And I guess I would be more on board with you with the factual details if we would have been granting it rather than saying, no, don't do that. Because then we would open the door to more people potentially creating violations, but we're not, we're saying, no, don't do that. So I can't see us getting other organizations in trouble with this opinion.
Well, do we have, I mean, what would you propose to do, Caitlin, considering the feedback and the discussion that we've had? Would you want to take another crack at trying to thread the needle and bringing another document back to the next meeting? Commissioner Skoglund, I mean, considering the vote and where we're at in discussion, any other ideas?
Unless one of the three nays is indicated that they would reconsider their vote based on an amendment that they would make today. We actually would need 5 members of the commission to adopt it. Actually, Caitlin just made that point. I think that we take it back. I think we're gonna have discussions with Jesse about the equal protection concern that was raised to address Commissioner Glenn's concern. And I don't know, I think that we've heard a lot on.
If I can interject.
Of course.
If it's, the advocacy seems to play a major part in the rationale. If I was reading through old opinions, they're like 2 paragraphs long. You know, here's the factual statement.
That is true.
Here's our interpretation of the statute, and it's 3 or 4 sentences. The more that we keep putting in here, the more that we as a commission find ourselves exposed to interesting interpretations, which sometimes I have. Sometimes we all have, right? I mean, that's just a factor of being lawyers, et cetera.
Calling us out.
Exactly
Exactly the worst.
So and there's only one exempt person, so congratulations. I got Commissioner Glenn.
I have,
So-
I haven't seen.
That's the person making the equal protection.
So, yeah, exactly. So if it is simply narrowed down to, there is a prohibition under A1 and 2, what's it, A1 and 2. And then to reach into this exception and allow for there to be an expansion or on a lack of limitation on any kind of compensation or gift, where that's described. You have to meet these particular qualifications, and then we have the meat of it. Does a seminar like this qualify under the exception?
I think that I'm generally amenable to anything that's short, generally shorter opinions in general, but I
Yeah.
think providing more analysis and guidance is helpful. But in this, I think we're kind of in a tough spot because the question that we were asked is, does Ed Choice meet these criteria? And the commission is being asked to offer an opinion on whether Ed Choice meets these criteria. So I don't know how we square that circle and not answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're being asked to
Well, then
make a determination.
I mean, we're arguing about the wording in the opinion and continuity's sake, but are we all in agreement that the answer is still no? That they can't do that?
I mean, honestly, I don't know. I don't know, because as I look through the opinion, it feels like it's filled with so much extraneous material that.
So, but if you just look at the
Do
serve and
I,
strengthen, do you think that they fulfill?
I would agree policy wise that we would not want to open up an exception for people just because they educate to have unlimited checkbooks for whatever mango fango that they want to put out there. And I think we're all on the same page there. The question is, as our opinion of us, and I appreciate, director and council, but it's not their opinion. This is our opinion. And I protect that. That's all.
Do you,
So I'd almost say that this is yes, it's an advisory opinion, but there comes a point that it feels like there's a 180-degree shift of they're looking for maybe they're allowed to, looking for an exception that just gives them free rein to do what they want without giving us the facts that are actually necessary to make that conclusion. So it's advisory in an improper judicial sense.
So would it make you feel better if we took number 3 and literally just said, like that last paragraph, like, based on the information provided, it does not appear that they were established to blah, 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 blah.
we could actually delete all the analysis.
And delete all the other
if that's what makes people uncomfortable. And just make it, this is the answer.
Right, that way we take out the commission previously interpreted, we take out the narrow application of 237H.
Resolve the dicta and analysis and just answer.
And just answer the question straight on, that way at least they get their answer, we're not delaying them again, because I'm assuming they're wanting to start planning something.
Do you have enough information to?
Well, I think the question is whether or not that resolves some concerns by commissioners, because if the answer is yes, we can resolve that here. If the answer is no, then we need to come up with other ways, and because.
So then my proposal would be to delete paragraph.
Would you just delete all of the number 3 analysis? And then just, as you indicated, just replace that language essentially?
Yes, just, so basically delete the number 3 language up until, you have to reword that
So
beginning.
everything from finally basically through,
Everything from finally through regarding, like, up until regarding the second.
and delete for the foregoing reasons.
Or just start it here. So start it from with, it does not appear that Ed Choice was established, or based on the additional information submitted by Ed Choice, it doesn't appear that they were. And then we're answering their question. So for the foregoing reasons, we say it doesn't meet the exception, but you can still do this. And that's just regurgitating the statute. That's not really giving anything else.
Right.
Would that help?
Factual concern.
Yeah, there's no fact finding really.
I think that would.
Can you, I just want to make sure everyone here's the motion.
Gosh.
And so-
Yeah, which paragraph? Oh, we need number of
But
paragraphs.
also I want to make sure that other commissioners who voted no as well are also have the
Understand.
opportunity to be heard as well.
Yes.
Thing-
Are you saying I talked?
Cause I don't want to open it up to everywhere either, so I mean, I get that.
Okay, so the way I'm understanding it is under subheader of question 3, we begin with the second clause, I guess, of the last paragraph. Based on the information submitted by Ed Choice, it does not appear, blah, 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 rest of the language in that paragraph. For the foregoing reasons, the commission finds Ed Choice does not meet and keep the stuff about 46-237D and,
I don't think you keep D because they didn't ask it.
Good point.
okay,
I mean, it's-
that's fine.
Yeah, we can cut it.
I didn't ask about it.
if Judge Hellman was here, I think he'd say, don't go beyond what you were asked.
Yeah, so we could even just,
Okay, so cut that. So it is just those 2
those,
paragraphs
just those two
of
paragraphs.
subheader 3.
Yep.
Yes, are you making a motion?
Okay.
Yes, we are deleting everything from finally up until I don't remember.
Based on.
Until based on the additional information submitted by Ed Choice. And then we are also deleting everything from the paragraph starting KSA 46-237D through that same one at the end. So we'll end with to the part that says lodging to the Ed Choice annual program. Everything after that would be deleted.
I think one of the nays should second that motion.
I second that motion.
All right, do we feel like for the record that the motion has been properly articulated?
Caitlin, Mark, you
It's recorded.
It
I
has been
understand.
seconded. Okay. Well, is there any additional discussion? If not, we'll just go ahead and take a vote. All in favor of approving the motion as articulated by Commissioner Ramirez, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion passes.
We
We
did
got through
it.
It can be done.
48 minutes later.
Well, it takes a lot
We're-
longer to pass bills, so, just saying.
Okay.
It's progress.
Turning back to the agenda, we have an executive director's report. Director Skoglund, do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, so first I've got a budget, the budget request, but first I want to say, we spent hours talking about that opinion, and I do want to say, I think that I appreciate all of the work that everyone put in on that. I think that we make opinions better by this, and I understand that's not always the most scintillating conversation to always have, but digging in on these tough questions is exactly what we're here to do. So thank you for doing that. So now you get to listen to me talk for a while. So we have the budget submission that is due on September 15th, which is before our next scheduled monthly meeting. So this is where we will discuss and approve the budget. At the end of this, I would ask that the commission make a motion to approve the budget and permit any technical adjustments unless the commission has other changes they would like to make, of course, to the budget request. So those of you who are newer to the budget process, we draft a budget, we submit it on September 15th. The governor will make her budget, and then the legislature will evaluate it. We are a biennial budget agency, which means that on every other year, we submit adjustments to the current year and then the 2 out years. So this year we're submitting adjustments to fiscal year 2025 and a new budget for fiscal year 26 and 27. Next year, we will only consider adjustments to what has already been approved for fiscal 26 and 27. Honestly, it's a great budget approach. I really appreciate that we are considered a biennial budget agency. It makes the budget process go much smoother. That first page you have shows the actual for fiscal year 2024 amount, then the amount that we were approved for by the legislature and the governor in fiscal 25. Then you have the request that I've drafted for 25, 26, and 27. And we'll go through each of that with quite a bit of detail here. So when I'm going to go through each.
Should I don't seem to have this file. Remember, which file is this?
It's in the open meeting materials on page 15.
Okay. Let's see if I, go ahead.
And if not, we can definitely print you a copy.
Okay, I should have it.
I'll also note that if you get tired of listening to me talk and you're someone who wants to look at the granular budget details, we have the entire budget fit on one page on every line on page 20 of the PDF. After each fiscal year, I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions. The first is fiscal year 2025. Now we have an approved budget for fiscal 25. This is only changes from that budget. And I'll note that we do have a little bit of an increase, but that increase doesn't require any additional funding request from the legislature. The only additional funding that's required is something that is already provided due to a reappropriation. Essentially, we had about $5,000 of unused funds in fiscal year 24. That carries forward to fiscal 25, and we are planning to use those funds unless the legislature chooses to lapse it.
Fiscal year runs from July the 1st to July the 1st.
Yes. Yeah, July to June in Kansas. That's right. So we are currently in fiscal year 2025, which means we already have quite a bit of understanding and detail about what actual expenses are because we've already incurred a bit. So our total budget request for 25 is $863,869, which includes $560,050 from the state general fund. We have two funding sources. The first is the state general fund, which is basically just taxpayer dollars. It's the general fund for the state. And the other source is our fee fund. Our fee fund takes in funds from PAC registrations, candidate fees, civil penalties, things like that. So there's a few sources for it, and that fee fund is where we get about anywhere from 25 to 33% of our budget from on any typical year.
Weren't there some fees or fines that were excluded?
Fines go to the state general fund as of I think April 2023, I think is when that change went into effect. But since then, fines have gone to the state general fund, which we think, generally speaking, is probably a good, for a lot of reasons. There's good rationale for that.
The penalties stay with.
That is correct.
Okay.
Essentially, late fees still stay with the fee fund. Fines do not. Fines, they go to the general fund.
The legislature has to approve both the expenditure from the state general fund and the expenditure from the governmental ethics fee fund.
That is somewhat true.
Oh.
That used to be true. That is true for the state general fund. Our fee fund, as of about 4 years ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago, was changed to a no limit fund, which essentially means we are providing a budget and we express our intent to stay within it. But if there's an emergency cost that we have to incur, we can go over that amount, but we do not. We stay within the bounds that the legislature approves for us. That's pretty typical. Most fee funds are no limit. But they do still provide, in the budgeting process, we have an amount that we say we will expend and we never go above that or have never done so. So in terms of, I'm going to talk about major changes to the budget in 25. That's really anything above $500. But again, if you want the full granular detail, it's on the last page. The biggest reduction is we're terminating a contract for our database. We found a much cheaper avenue and have saved quite a bit of funds. We've saved over $6,000 in fiscal year 25 alone on terminating that contract and replacing it with a software solution. We also have, because we already know about some commissioner preference to attend virtually and reflecting current usage, we can drop the commissioner mileage allocation by just over $3,000. We will be printing a little bit less at the state printer, so $1,500 less, and we've updated our IT, internet, and phone pricing, which saves us another $500.
So curiously, what's in your database? I mean,
all the campaign finance data and lobbyist data.
Okay.
So every line item of every report will ultimately get entered into data, which is then used and it gets entered into a database, which is then processed.
Okay.
We've had some issues with the database previously where it was unsupported and there were license issues with it that prevented computer replacements from occurring. We had to replace it. And yeah, it's we still have a couple of aging units because of that issue that we're trying to deal with in this budget. But we now have a new software solution that honestly is a continuation of the old database, but it's the new supported version. So the conversion will actually be very easy. Everyone's already trained up on it for the most part. So it's going to be much cheaper, easier, and more effective. So I like all those things. I'm never sad about saving $6,000. In terms of increases, the first and biggest is employee parking, which we again mostly pay for with reductions elsewhere in the budget. Then we actually just had an issue that I'm glad this happened before the budget submission instead of after. The building management for this building just transitioned to someone else who is based out of Chicago. Due to something with that transition, there was an issue with the janitorial contract, and they, without, I won't go through all of the blow by blow for you, even though it's quite a time here. The increased cost now for a new janitorial contract is about $2,700. Postage, the costs have gone up quite a bit. We now so that we're increasing that by about $2,000 to reflect that increased cost. The net software solution for the campaign finance database, this is mostly a one-time cost. About 1,300 of this is a one-time cost. Total is 1,600. Office 365 and then computer replacements are about 866. We now know that the COGO conference will be in LA this year, and so we can base our what's called meals and incidentals, M&IE, on the actual expenses for the location based on the rates that are provided, which is $641 increase from what we had budgeted. And then I know you all care very deeply about this. Water is more expensive now, and we're using more of it.
You know, that's a major cost to Congress. Water, I saw an article about that one.
You know, the commission once issued an opinion on whether or not it was a legal use of a campaign fund to buy water for your constituents who show up at their offices.
Wow.
The conclusion was yes, it was a permitted expense. So there's a little bit down there at the bottom. There's some recategorization of expenses, but for example, if you look at the line by line, it looks like there's an increase of $8,500 for attorneys. That's offset by a corresponding decrease in other contractual services. We're just trying to be more transparent about what these are, so we're moving them into the correct account codes. Any questions on fiscal year 25 before I go to 26?
For me,
Fiscal year 26, the agency's budget totals $877,355. That's an increase of just over 13,000 or 1.6% above our request from 25. Almost all of this is rent and health insurance costs that we have absolutely no control over. I'm going to talk through reductions first because they make me happier than increases. It's the off election cycle. The local election typically costs us quite a bit less in postage, so we have $6,000 less that we will be spending. We don't need to spend a one-time cost on software solution for our database again, so we save $1,200 there. And then we don't know where the COGO conference will be, so we just use the general continental rate, which is $573 cheaper than LA because LA is expensive. Increases, so our building rent, we're going to talk about this a bit. So our lease ends in November 2025, and we will have to negotiate a new lease. We pay admin to negotiate the lease for us. My understanding is that they also negotiate the lease for the Department of Revenue, who is right over there, and they pay about $18 a square foot. For context, we spend about $13.80 a square foot, I think.
Right now, yeah.
As of right now. So I expect the negotiation to be at least to $18 a square foot, which is what this reflects. So that's an increase of $12,500, a huge amount for us, that we expect we'll probably have to incur. And health insurance also has gone up drastically for the agency funded component of it. It saves employees from incurring more expense, but the agency budget does get impacted from that. So that's another $7,300. I won't talk too long about this, but there's the monumental building surcharge that drives me mad. Any agency in Shawnee County has to pay a monumental building surcharge, which is an amount you pay per square foot. That money, I think, goes to support the Capitol complex, I think restoration and maintenance and upkeep. And it's in fiscal 26, it goes up to $4 a square foot.
So that's to the state though.
Yes, it goes to the state, but we pay it.
Okay.
So that's an increase of $4,200 just on the surcharge alone. And then our mileage goes back to, we don't know what commissioner behavior will be in that fiscal year 26. So it goes back up by $1,250. And then Caper's contributions go up by almost $700. I'm just going to go to 27 because it's short and I can take questions on the two out years, 26 and 27, before I talk about the enhancement. In fiscal year 27, our budget is $889,344, an increase of almost $12,000, which is 1.4% above the 26 request. Most of this is again, health insurance and postage and the famed monumental building surcharge. And by famed, I mean, you've heard about it for the first time 32 seconds ago. The reduction is Capers contributions goes down by about $1,700. Increases, however, the first is health insurance, which goes up another $7,200 in fiscal year 27 above the 26 amount. Postage, we're going to need more for the statewide and House election cycle, about $2,000 above 26. Then the monumental building surcharge is another $1,750. Computer replacements and increased Office 365 costs is $1,300. And then the COGL conference is likely to occur in Canada in fiscal year 27 because it happens every 4 years. It's in some Canada location. I honestly, for this, I averaged the 5 largest cities in Canada in terms of the locality rates and came out to about 1145 is the increased. We'll know more later. COGL does not communicate much about where they're going to be in advance. So 26 and 27, before I go into the enhancement, are there any questions about any of that? Right. So I also have an enhancement package. An enhancement is any component of the budget that is a programmatic change, something that is different from how the commission has operated previously. This is big. Our office is small. Our amazing investigator is in a very small, something that would barely qualify as a closet. We certainly have no room to add people. So if we were looking to add positions, which is part of this request as well, we cannot stay in this building. We can't stay in this office space. So this request is basically to, long story short, to add an attorney. I'll talk about why in a minute, to add a full-time investigator position to help Scott out, and pay for moving expenses. It'll also, we have to move to a new building. Based on our research, we think that any new building in this area will be between $18 and $20 a square foot, and increased space will be somewhere between 4,750 and 5,000 square feet. We're currently in about 3,500 for context. So our total office rent would be $100,000 is what we're looking at budgeting for it. But that also obviously offsets with a loss of the current rent that we'd be paying, which is $59,640 in fiscal year 26. Now, in terms of why we want to add positions, the first is a new attorney. Obviously, state agencies with regulatory enforcement roles would benefit quite a bit from having, there's 2 different types of counsel. There's enforcement counsel and there is compliance counsel. Now, as much as I definitely appreciate all the work with the AG's office, and I always appreciate getting to work with Jesse anytime I can, I will say that having an in-house attorney who is doing enforcement separate from someone who's doing compliance is more in line with how most regulatory agencies operate in this field. I know the AG's office handles this as well on even something like COMA and CORA. If you ask the enforcement officer, they will say, I can't answer this, go to the compliance officer because I'm the one who's in charge if you mess it up. And so that's having that division of labor will help quite a bit for not just legal issues, but also logistical and planning issues. The workload has increased pretty substantially in the last 5 years. So having a new attorney would be helpful. We also have what I'm terming a full-time investigator position because the investigation workload has increased quite a bit in the last 5 or 6 years, but mostly in complexity, but also in quantity. But what I will say is that this position is not just an investigator. The intention is for this to be a cross-trained position across all compliance staff. So if something happens to compliance staff, someone leaves without a lot of notice, for example, it takes a while to fill these positions, and having someone there and available, cross-trained to that role would be great. We had a packing party coordinator leave a few years ago. We had to cover that desk, and one person managed to cover 2 desks at once. And based on, while she did an amazing job, I never want to have to ask someone to do that again. It's tough, but they also would serve in like a compliance and auditing support role. They would help do desk reviews of campaign finance reports. They would do audits as needed. That's kind of the current plan for an investigator anyway. That's always been how the investigation position has operated in that way. But frankly, we have too many investigations. We want to resolve them quickly, and one part-time investigator, even as great as Scott is, simply there's not enough hours in the day. It's not possible. So that would offset with the conflict counsel cost, which is $8,500 a year. The attorney would be about, including fringe benefits, would be about $107,000. The full-time investigator position is just under $80,000. Moving expenses are a one-time cost in 26 of what we've estimated to be about $10,000. I think it will be a little less than that. I think it'll be more towards 8,000. But unfortunately, there's a lot of flexibility and variability in that, especially given inflation. And so I anticipate that by the time we would be moving in 26, if this occurred, if the legislature and governor approved it, then the cost may be a little higher. So the total enhancement increase, which is all being requested from the state general fund because we can't take a cost like this in the fee fund, is 229,000 in 26 and 219,000 in 27.
Do you have any idea of where you're gonna go?
Yeah, we've looked at a few places, but right now we're mostly looking for comparable locations because we don't know what will be available at that time. Honestly, if something is available now and is still available at the time we're moving, it's probably not a place we want to be, just based on what we've seen from places that are open that long. So we're looking at comparable rates and seeing the types of things. There is office space around here. I know that insurance moved to the other side of town from their location that was just on the other side of the Capitol. I'd rather stay as close to the Capitol as possible, but my goal is economy on a number of fronts. Not just, I want to be easily available if a legislator wants to walk across the street and ask us questions or turn in a report, but I also want to make sure that we aren't essentially paying an extremely high cost for a small space that we need to be utilizing. Though frankly, having more positions would be necessary there. Any other questions about the enhancement request or anything else in the budget, frankly?
Well, how slow is the investigator getting to work? Are there items being left uninvestigated? Is there delay involved?
The issue is less in getting things done and more the fact that there are highly complex investigations that require just a lot of hours in the day to do forensic accounting, to dig into bank accounts and determine the flow of money, things like that. Right now we have, I think, 11 open investigations, which is lower than it had been. And most of those are pretty highly complex matters in terms of the types of things we're dealing with.
We also get a lot, I think, during the election cycle. A lot of folks reach out to us to investigate potential campaign finance violations happening while people are campaigning. So we see that uptick as well, which is.
And the issue is because those are coming in now, they are current and immediate issues. So those end up taking a lot of precedence on time allocation.
So what is he unable to get to?
Well, right now, I mean, we're doing, there are the more complex investigations that require a little more time end up getting a little bit less attention, I would say, but that's not because we don't have a great investigator. It's simply that there's just not enough hours.
Okay, so is there anything he's not able to get to?
I would say that our investigations are taking quite a while to resolve on large complex matters. I mean, the problem is that when I say we have 11 investigations, 2 of those are extremely large. That matters that every time we look at something creates another question that we have to investigate. That's part of that investigation. And those matters then become something that frankly, we need 100 hours to get to the next step in that investigation. But we have other issues that also have to occur. I mean, there are situations where I am making some investigatory calls as well to try to help, which obviously is not something that I'd like to be doing if I don't have to, as much as I appreciate getting to work on this stuff.
Director Skoglund, what action are we needing the commission to take with respect to the budget, and how does that relate to each specific year?
So if there's no more questions, the ultimate request would be to have a motion to approve the budget with permitting any technical changes, since there's still 2.5 weeks before I actually submit the budget, and I expect some feedback from the Division of Budget on something here or there that needs some mobility. That happens pretty commonly. So, but the actual amounts typically are going to be about the same.
Do any commissioners have questions? Do any commissioners have concerns about the budget as written, or are we prepared to make a motion to approve?
My concerns are increasing the the budget by, more than 25%. And I think we would have some of the, legislative intent of having separate conflict counsel defeated if it's in-house. I think that's just too much to ask of lawyers to be under the employ of an individual and yet independent for purposes of Chinese walls or whatever the proper terminology is nowadays with regard to separation. And that, it's nice having a totally third, I was about to call you a wheel, third wheel come in and have that particular approach to it. And then on the investigator, I mean, I don't mean to be like we need to wait for disaster, but if we're still ahead of, or at least on the investigations, I don't see that as a necessary expense unless we're planning on doing a whole bunch of additional investigation.
Any other concerns? Any other comments? Director Skoglund, with respect to a commission action today, is this something we'll expect to be revisited a year from now? And will there be future opportunities to, let's say, discuss more nuance with respect to the requested increase?
So this is the opportunity to approve this budget, and since our lease runs out in November 2025, the next time we would be addressing this budget, the next time we'll be looking at the budget for approval will be August 2025. And by that point, if we haven't made a decision on whether we're staying or leaving, we've got issues. So so really we can continue to talk about it and get updates, but in terms of approving the budget for submission to the legislature.
Or if I can maybe restate maybe what Chairman Hale was maybe asking.
Sure.
It is the approval of this budget a recommendation from the commission that in fact those positions are necessary? Or that are recommended by the commission itself?
It's recommended, yes, it would be recommended by the commission as the budget. The intent would be to hire those positions, but only after we have the office to put them in. Right now, we don't have anywhere to put anyone, unfortunately. But the legislature would have to approve it and the governor would have to approve it before any of that could happen anyway.
Question. So noticing some of the situations that come across and are from several years ago, is the slowness of investigation the reason we're getting those so far out?
Yes.
So that would solve that issue.
Yes.
So you wouldn't have to deal with people giving them fines for something they did 3 years ago.
Yes. That
makes me feel.
That is part of the goal. I do want to mention again that part of this position again is hoping to address that cross-training issue. And because in a 8.5 person agency like we're in, everyone is their own person. And while we try to cross-train people a bit, everyone operates on their own island in a lot of respects. And I'd like to, in terms of continue, if I could speak words, continuity of operations plans, stress having some ability to cross-train and fill roles internally as much as possible.
Okay, we should have a motion. Do any commissioners wish to make a motion?
I move that we approve the budget as proposed with room for technical changes as requested.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to approve as recommended by commission staff, signify by saying aye. All opposed say nay.
Okay.
Can you help me? I think my speaker may have cut out.
It's currently 4-1, so you would need to vote to determine one way or the other whether to approve the budget. We need 5.
Yeah, I will vote to approve.
Okay.
Moving back to the agenda, the second component was a campaign finance update.
Yes, so then the campaign finance update will be pretty quick. There were a total of 1,525 candidates that had to file for the primary, and we only ended up having to send failure to file notices for 13 of them, which is remarkable that it's that low. Party committees, 184 had to file and only 31 received failure to file.
That's kudos to staff for all the follow-up and et cetera.
Absolutely, yes, and I want to make that.
I don't want to give any credit to the candidates. I want to make.
That's a good point.
No, I'm very lucky to have the staff that we do here,
That's a lot of
because they are, always responsive. They always provide amazing guidance. They are there to assist people. And this, I think that, only sending 13 failure to files on 1525 candidates is, frankly, that's shocking for a primary. That is a very, very, very good number.
Oh, a primary too. Goodness, yeah.
Now, I will say the bigger issue we run into in the general is people who lost their primary and do not turn in their general election report.
Yeah.
But we always come up with new ways to try to address them too. But yeah, 184 parties had to file and 31 had to receive a failure to file, all of which were central committees, which is typical. Central committees are sometimes have a lot going on and sometimes have less experienced campaign finance staff. Political committees with 218 had to file and 14 received failures to file.
So I do have a question.
Sure.
We have two new parties in the state, which is a little unusual. I guess it hasn't happened, what, 8 years or more? I can't remember when the Reform Party was here. And one of them is filed online and all the numbers are 0. The other one hasn't filed at all. So is that coming, or?
I think we're figuring out, we are working to make sure that all registered party committees properly file their reports.
And then the other question is, they had petition circulators, and they collected between 25 and 35,000 signatures from what I'm told. And I actually was able to read from one party, and all these were out-of-state circulators. Is there no reporting requirement of who's paying all these out-of-state circulators?
Not until the moment they became a party.
So is that a hole in our campaign finance somehow that,
You could view it that way.
okay, that,
I think that would be a reasonable conclusion.
it's just, I believe there's out-of-state money involved in it. I just want to find out what that is, but it's not possible. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That is correct.
And that's because all activity prior to the registration is not disclosed.
Well, there's no entity. There's no legal entity.
Right.
So it needs to be a legal entity to do it, and then they can file it.
Sometimes those entities voluntarily register PACs.
Yeah.
And if they voluntarily registered as a PAC, they'll have to report their expenditures. But if they didn't voluntarily register as a PAC and don't meet the definition for one reason or another, then.
But all the names, I mean, I didn't read them all, but in dozens and dozens of pages, they were all out-of-state circulators.
Any additional questions? Okay. There are no questions. The next item is civil penalty assessments. I believe just to note for purposes of the record. Do you want to run through these, Director Scoglin?
Sure. There's 2 for an amended October report from 2023. There's 4 for delayed appointment of treasurer forms, and then 3 for a delayed receipts and expenditures report. That's it. You got them all listed there.
Returning to the agenda and noting the item that was added just before our meeting, there was a need for discussion regarding an appointment of a secondary hearing officer, and this was something that I had discussed with Jesse and with Director Scoglin. We in essence had a situation where we had appointed a commissioner to serve as hearing officer, and that commissioner was unavailable. And so we just need to discuss what kind of procedure we think we ought to have in order to appoint a replacement. I believe the language is duly appointed, so I think there needs to be some action by the commission to, let's say, give somebody the authority to serve as hearing officer for a hearing. Director Scoglin or Jesse, do you want to speak to this issue?
I'll give it over to Jesse, not to volunteer him.
Sure. It's easier that way.
I try to stay out of anything involving hearing officer appointments to the extent that I can. I can provide some policy commentary, but
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman. Trying to find what.
So this is because Commissioner Jackson is not available?
He became unavailable after the last meeting.
Right. He was available for July, but he wasn't available for August.
Yeah.
And his hearings were noticed up for July.
Mhm.
I think that's correct.
So it's my recollection that at the end of the last meeting, Commissioner Jackson was asked to, and he agreed to serve as the hearing or presiding officer. And yeah, and so obviously he agreed. And I mean, true, the commission didn't vote on it, but he agreed during the open meeting. And so my office just thinks out of an abundance of caution, because provision was not made for a secondary appointment in the eventuality of Commissioner Jackson's becoming unavailable, that this needed to be addressed at the next meeting and no action should be taken in between meetings.
Is
So,
it your recommendation that the commission adopt a policy of some kind to
Yes.
resolve all of these situations, should they occur in the future?
yeah, to the extent possible, going forward, basically continue to ask for someone to,
What would the wording in the motion be?
KSA 254161 H1 says that if a substitute is required for a person who is disqualified or becomes unavailable for any other reason, any action taken by a duly appointed substitute for a disqualified or unavailable person is as effective as if taken by the latter.
What would the wording of the motion be?
Yeah, like what's the actual solution to it?
Well, what's the wording of the motion? We need a motion, obviously, to deal with the situation.
Right, for whatever the solution is. So we need to figure out what the solution is.
Yeah, I don't think we're at.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll say for myself that like I'm perfectly happy to volunteer myself to serve as a backup hearing officer with the approval of the commission. I think my only concern would be for the new requirements we have under the Administrative Procedures Act. For instance, the concept of pre-hearing conferences. There may be certain tasks performed by one hearing officer kind of as a lead up to a hearing. And what implications does that have, if any, on the actual hearing that takes place? Any thoughts just regarding just the idea of defaulting to the chairman serving as the substitute officer for a hearing?
Chairman Hale, this is Jesse Burris. I need to correct myself. The statutory provision I read is from CAPA 77-514E. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Sorry.
So is the question really, if they pass a policy that says, for example, that the chair will serve in the absence of the hearing officer, that would constitute being duly appointed, and in the absence of the chair, the vice chair serves or the hearing is continued. That policy establishes duly appointed.
Yeah, I think that would be an appropriate option.
Well, can I interject? How about instead, the policy would be that when a commissioner is appointed as a presiding officer, that they will simultaneously appoint as a backup the chair and vice chair in that order.
It's good.
Oh, that'd be good.
So it's not so much we're actually doing the appointment and it's not an appointment
Is
made
that
by.
a motion?
Right.
Well, motion, Mr. Berger.
I think it depends if we all agree.
Excuse me?
We have to vote for it.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
idea-
yeah. I won't disclose my
I
motion.
think we're finalizing.
So Commissioner Berger, is the idea that we would have kind of standard language as we often use when entering into recess session, that we would make verbatim before articulating a specific hearing officer?
That would be my thought, yes, that in the appointment of a hearing officer, that we simultaneously appoint as default backup, either an individual by name or chair by position and vice chair as secondary.
I would second that motion.
The motion has been made, the motion has been seconded. Is there any additional discussion?
Major move.
So moved.
Major move.
Very clearly.
There's no additional discussion. We'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes.
It's the quickest we've reached consensus on anything that's not minutes.
Yeah.
That was good.
This is procedural.
Well, and with that said, the next item is we have 3 civil fine hearings on the agenda. And I believe Commissioner Solbach is the appointed hearing officer in these 3 matters. Is that correct, Commissioner Solbach?
I don't, are all 3 matters set for hearing today? I thought only one was gonna be heard today.
They
Well-
were, sorry, Chairman.
No, I was going to ask you next, Caitlin, if there's any background or context you could provide about these three items on the agenda.
Yes, absolutely. So the first, as you all saw, I think I filed it yesterday, a motion to continue complaint number 774's hearing that was presented to the commission. I also would orally repeat the motion. The reason that I requested it be continued, and I also provided a copy to the respondent, was because we have been in communication. He's communicated with staff as recently as today and is working on getting his reports filed. So we wanted it to be continued to the September meeting to secure compliance, and that is my request.
I would, so move.
Second.
Motion has been made, motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to approve the continuance of complaint number 777?
774.
774, excuse me, 774. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion passes.
Okay, and then 775, which was set for hearing today, we actually received the filing of the outstanding report about 30 minutes or so before the meeting. And because that report was filed, I would request the commission to dismiss complaint number 775, as it was not an election sensitive report. It was the January of 2024 report, and it has been filed and we have achieved compliance. So I would request dismissal.
And you're satisfied with?
We are satisfied with the report, yes.
So move.
Second.
Motion has been made, motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion regarding the motion to dismiss complaint 775? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes.
And finally, complaint number 777, which we had originally requested a continuance. We were satisfied with a filing on July 29th, 2024 by the new leadership for this committee. So I would, again, due to compliance, request dismissal. And again, to answer Commissioner Berger's, I'm reading his thoughts. We were satisfied. We were satisfied with that report as well. So I would request dismissal of complaint number 77 due to compliance.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made, the motion has been seconded. Any additional questions about the motion to dismiss complaint 777? If there are none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion passes.
And just as a kind of a point of information, maybe point of order, as we're working on administrative regulations, we're going to look at a way for what I refer to as more of a ministerial violation to actually go by a proper due process default process. Because I think all of these 3 were all failures to file, ministerial in nature, mathematical almost in violation, which it'd be nice to have individuals know that it can just be defaulted.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Thank you, Commissioner Berger. Any additional discussion? The next item on the agenda is recessed sessions. We have 2. Director Skoglund, can you approximate how much time do you believe we need for each session?
You all know more than I do on how much time you want to
See, what
discuss
if
these
you-
issues.
The first one I would
What
say
do you think?
15.
15 for the first one?
I would like to talk just procedurally about the first session. Last time,
since these are matters which eventually would be taken over by the Office for Prosecutorial Functions, I don't think that it's appropriate for staff or the party or his counsel to be present.
We would not be taking over for prosecution. So at a hearing, it would be the complainants that are listed, that are presenting their argument.
You'd be all right, and the commission will be all right with a person who is a complainant to file and control the prosecution on behalf of its office.
It's not the prosecution, it's a civil matter, and our statutes presume that any individual can file.
Prosecution in the sense of who is presenting the case.
They have a right to do that by our statutes. So yes, we are the staff. I can't speak, I guess, for Mark. I am speaking for you. Staff is, I'm your counsel. Staff is fine with, I mean, that's happened before, and not in my tenure here because it's not been very long, but people have, and I know historically reviewing some of the older files in my office, people regularly used to file complaints outside members of the public against people and would.
My experience is that if a person has a complaint, it's better to contact the commission, let the commission file a complaint rather than to file themselves. Are you filing the complaint after letting this guy file it?
No, they filed the complaints.
Okay.
Well, hold on, there are three processes. We have the probable cause, which is the initial complaint.
Full sufficiency.
We have the sufficiency, original complaint, probable cause, which is the carryover, and then we have the actual first hearing.
Mhm.
And as I read the regulation, it says that petition for the hearing is taken over by the office.
Which regulation are you talking about?
1951, subsection C. But that being said, if the idea is that an individual complainant controls that process all the way through the hearing, I don't know. I'd want to think out loud with everybody about that.
1951C says the executive director shall file a complaint following the completion of an investigation conducted pursuant to KAR 19.3 if in the executive director's judgment there's probable cause to believe that a provision of relevant law has been violated.
Right.
And the issues that we would be talking about were in a hypothetical case, a third party has filed a complaint. A complaint has already been filed. We don't need a second additional complaint filed.
This is after the investigation, so that's.
We
that's
didn't,
separate from-
but it was brought to us first. There wasn't any investigation done by the commission before the filing of the complaint. The complaint was filed first.
They received the complaint.
The respondent receives the complaint.
And the complainants have
Well,
been,
that's not until we take an action.
Well, that's true.
We have to do something for that.
the respondents received the complaints upon filing.
Oh, upon filing, immediately, before we even know about it then.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
you tell us
we
the
all
same
know about
day.
the same,
Yeah,
yeah,
we know. the same day.
simultaneously.
I was thinking it was post sufficiency.
Well, sufficiency is, usually we have problems with sufficiency when someone outside the commission files a complaint.
Something
Fairly common.
When our executive director files a complaint, there's usually no problem with sufficiency.
Yeah.
We've submitted writing, so if it's I don't have an opinion.
Yeah, I will say that the reason that we don't join you in executive sessions when we are a complainant, obviously, is because it's an ex parte communication. We can't be in the room and the other party not be in the room. When we're not a party to the complaint, that issue doesn't arise. Now, I will say, at the end of the day, this is your motion. If you decide that you don't want us in the room, you don't have to have us in the room. That's all. I mean, that's really it. I mean, I like being able to be available to provide guidance as needed to the commission on something that we are not conflicted out from. But if you don't want us in the room, we don't need to be there. So it's up to you.
And you in the room.
Yeah, it's up to you all.
For them, I do think it's touching.
Well, I certainly appreciate the perspective, the context, the input. I mean, I understand from your point of view that you do not view yourself as the prosecuting authority, but imagine a scenario where somebody who initially brought the complaint later asks for the commission staff assistance. in the, let's say, the prosecution of the complaint. Is that a reasonable scenario to conceive?
I'd state it a little stronger that I think that if there is an alleged violation that passes, both tiers and goes to final hearing, I honestly wouldn't want to turn this commission into like a battleground among pro se litigants. Maybe I'm being out of tune there.
I think it's reasonable concern.
Commissioner,
In those situations, I think we ask you to take over.
just anecdotally, Director Skoglund, I mean, in the history where we essentially had somebody bringing an action, I mean, what is the common disposition, considering, let's say their lack of familiarity with the hearing process once they've initiated the complaint?
I would say that in my experience, it is extraordinarily rare for a third party to be filing a complaint, and in those instances, most of the time they are dismissed for lack of sufficiency. I will say that I don't recall if in my tenure we've had a hearing when the commission was not, when I was not a party.
We haven't.
I don't. It's been quite a while. It's not to say that it's unprecedented. It just,
For me, it's unprecedented because every hearing that we've had has been prosecuted by our executive director or our attorney.
yeah, 99.5% of complaints in this office are filed by me. The other 0.5, most of those are, a lot of times someone feels something is unethical and they'll file a complaint, but it doesn't state anything under our jurisdiction.
The best practice, if someone has a complaint, is to bring that complaint to the executive director and yet us file the complaint rather than the outside person file the complaint.
Jesse, do you have any perspective on this issue and from your point of view on whether or not it's appropriate for commission staff to be in the recessed session when dealing with these kinds of complaints?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I would want to do more research, but based on my reading of the statutes and regs thus far, a third, someone outside of commission staff is not, or a third party can bring a complaint and even, as far as I can tell, even present that complaint, prosecutes the wrong, I guess would be the wrong word, but yeah, I mean, present that complaint to the commission. And I mean, I guess if there's no possibility that the executive director or general counsel will be involved in, would be eventually or subsequently involved in presenting that complaint, then, they, I mean, I guess could be present. But if there's any possibility that they would eventually be involved in, presenting that complaint or pressing that complaint, I'm trying not to use the word prosecution, then to avoid the appearance of impropriety, it would probably be best to err on the side of caution. And
that's
Yeah.
more or less our thought. Caitlin and I were talking over here. I think that just, I think most people probably aren't too concerned about it, but just for sake of addressing the concern, and I don't think that there's a huge need for us to be in the room. I think that we'll just voluntarily say, remove us from that motion, only do the second motion for recess.
You
and
just have
handle
one
all-
session.
and you'll have one session, handle all your issues at once then.
Okay.
Because I think that, I mean, I think there's a great discussion and I think it's very interesting, but also I know you all have stuff you need to do and you probably want to eventually drive home.
Yeah, honestly, this may be a larger discussion of like legislative changes
Right.
and regulatory changes and making it very, so I have lots of thoughts and ideas now after
Okay.
having this discussion, so I appreciate it.
Sure. Well,
I'd like to address one other kind of procedural thing in open session, and that is the actual application of the Administrative Procedure Act. Is my reading of the statutes go, that the only time that CAPA is actually going to be applicable is when we reach the hearing stage. So it's after the 4161C
what's our public term, sufficiency hearing or sufficiency finding. It's after the 4161E
Probable cause.
probable cause finding, and at that point, we enter into a hearing contemplated by the statutes, and that's the only time that CAPA gets triggered.
Is that correct?
Um,
And I take that from 4161 C and E, and then 4163, which talks about the hearings themselves, ultimately concluding with that all hearings shall be open, which we know that the sufficiency and the probable cause are not open.
The provisions of the Kansas Administrative Procedure Act shall apply to actions by the Governmental Ethics Commission or commission staff, including but not limited to applications for judicial relief in district court. So, I mean, as long as something we're doing is an action of the Ethics Commission or commission staff, then capable.
yeah, I see what you're saying though, because it really doesn't come up until we get
Right.
to the formal hearing stage. That's
That's-
really when it starts. Yeah.
Right, because, and if that's not the case, then we would need to keep a record, a transcript of all closed sessions, which has never been done, and I think is contraindicated by the confidentiality.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I think the way you're interpreting CAPA is how I have as well.
Okay, I wanted to just talk about it open session.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah, and we can talk to the AG's office as well.
and
about-
confirm if there is any inconsistency with what we've discussed, we will clarify next meeting
We'll identify
after
those
checking
changes.
with AG.
Okay,
No, that's helpful. Thanks.
thank you.
I would
Well,
say
and-
45 minutes.
I think, yeah.
What'd you say?
Sorry. I would say 45 minutes if you're
Okay.
doing it all at once. Maybe a break in the middle. I guess you're on recess, so.
Commissioner Glenn.
Do I just read the second one?
Yeah.
I was getting ready. And what time, do I say?
3:30?
Yeah, let's,
Hold on, sorry to do this.
No.
Could I use the restroom just real quick?
oh, yeah.
I mean, I think we could, it's a recess session, so
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's enter into recess session and then,
No,
yeah,
that'll be great.
we'll get everybody a break when we're on the other side.
Okay, so I move that the commission recess this open meeting with conflict counsel Jesse Burris present to discuss matters related to confidential investigations pursuant to KSA 254165 and KSA 254161, and for good cause as provided by KAR 1962. Justification for recess is so that the commission can exercise quasi judicial functions when deliberating matters related to said confidential investigations as contemplated by KSA 75-430-18G1. The open meeting shall be resumed here at 3:30 p.m.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion, okay. We're back on, Director Scola.
Not quite.
It was really everything.
Start button, but it's taking its sweet time.
I forgot which way.
As is tradition.
So at 10 a.m. I'm checking, it's like, oh wait, it's 8 a.m.
Mm. I had the opposite problem at debate nationals my senior year, because we were on Pacific time. Yeah, it was not fun.
Oh, yeah.
It was my last semester, so I strategically chose courses.
All right, we should be good.
Okay, returning to open session, I believe Commissioner Berger has a motion that he would like to make.
Yes, as the obedient scrivener, I would like to present the following as a single motion. With regard to complaint 782, that we will be taking no action at present pending further resolution of that complaint. Dismissing 783, that there is a finding of sufficiency for complaints 784, 785, 786, 787, and 788, and 790. We do not find complaint 789 sufficient. And that CAPA is generally speaking, inappropriate and inapplicable to these stages of the proceeding, but under our inherent power to reconsider, we find nothing to reconsider.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been seconded. Is there any additional discussion? All in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. And I believe the next item on the agenda is to observe that our next meeting will take place in 4 weeks. I guess one remaining, I think that was it. Our next meeting will take place in 4 weeks on September 25th. Are there any other matters that we need to discuss? Or is there any actions the commission needs to take that we have not yet taken?
No.
Okay, if there are none, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to adjourn today's meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. Thank you, commissioners, staff, for your attendance and your thoughtful input today. It's greatly appreciated. We will look forward to seeing everybody again in 4 weeks, and enjoy your holidays, guys.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Oh,